You want me to turn that down a notch?
No, I'm starting. Hey guys, welcome to our special edition of Talking Scared. I am doing this one because it happens to be with UK author David Moody. He's my very, very favorite author, and I was very excited when he decided that he would do this with us. As of right now, we have 27,000 plus likes. Thank you so very much, Haunted Honeymooners. We couldn't be more stoked. We never saw this coming as quickly as it did, and we're so very happy that it is. We just got confirmed yesterday for the Mothman Festival. That's going to be September 20th through 22nd, so you're more than welcome to come out there. Come check us out. And there's a good possibility the minister might be there. We'll see. We'll see. There's a possibility in it. So that is September 20th through 22nd. We have a live psychic reading coming up soon for you guys. So that's pretty freaking cool. Not with me, with James. I'm going to be back behind the computers.
Have to bring them in.
And then also we're going to have Castle Black, and we're going to have Wells Township reviews and interviews coming up for you. So we've got that coming as well. On top of all of that, yeah, I know, we've got a lot going on. We are going to have Talking Scared with Caleb from Fallsburg Beer Place starting next Monday at 9:30 regular time. Don't forget about all that. Clinton Road, Devil's Tree, going to be out shortly. So we got plenty of stuff coming up for you. And we have David getting keyed in with us right now. Should just be a minute or two. We already tested this.
Hello.
It's so good to have you on. I'm very excited about this one. A little nervous, not gonna lie. Thank you so very much for being a part of Talking Spirit and for taking some time out to talk to me. And thank you so much for the book.
Oh, it got to you.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Uh,
Somewhere.
so
Hey, excellent. That's good.
Show my autograph.
Alrighty, so want to tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, most of us know who you are, but just in case.
Well, where do we start? I've been doing this stuff for far too long now, writing about the end of the world for about the last 20 odd years, which makes me feel really old, because I am really old now. Kind of creeps up on you and takes you by surprise. So I started writing back in the mid-90s, and I went down the traditional route and did what everybody does and wrote a book and started sending it out to agents and editors and everything, and didn't really get anywhere with it. So I then wrote another book, which was Autumn, a zombie book, and I just kind of caught a couple of really cool waves. I caught the first wave of self-publishing and also caught the zombie phenomenon when it really blew up for the first time. So suddenly my little self-published books just went crazy. And I wrote a few sequels to Autumn, and the first book was made into a terrible film, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. And then I just kept writing, and amazingly, Guillermo del Toro, the guy behind Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water and Hellboy and so on, he got a copy of one of my novels, Hater, and everything really went stratospheric for a little time there, and that's kind of how I kicked off.
Nice. And I am very glad that he got a hold of one of your books because, like I said, you are my favorite author, and that is my favorite book.
That's so cool to hear. Thank you. I'm blushing now.
Absolutely. I purchased that book like right out of high school, and I remember all the different times just waiting for the next release and waiting as patiently as I could be to see which store was going to get it first.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's always the hard part when there's a release. You don't know where it's going to come to first.
Yeah. It did go a little bit crazy for a while with Hater because Del Toro got attached to it. And yeah, it was just, I think again, it was just, there was no planning or anything behind it. It was just luck. And it had a very distinctive cover with the blood and the scrawled writing. And it really just, it took off more than I ever thought it would do. So I was going to say that cover, just to give you an example of how lo-fi all of this was when I first started, that cover, I pinched some of my daughter's poster paints, and we were out there together in the summer, just with bits of paper, writing hater and with our fingers, and that little graphic that we did there, just it's ended up on copies of the book all around the world. It's bizarre.
That's amazing. I'm so happy that you shared that with us, because when you have different little things that you're doing with your family and stuff, it just makes it that much more exciting that that's the one that got picked and got thrown out there for everybody to see.
Yeah.
And I still have my hater from way back when.
Hey, that's good. First edition
Yeah.
hardcover. That's nice.
Yeah. Absolutely. I told you I was right on the scene with the hater. My ex-husband absolutely hated it when I sat down to read some of the books, because I just completely zone out, and he'd try to talk to me. I said, shh.
You mentioned that, and I'm really pleased to have had that effect. That makes me feel quite good.
It made me feel quite good too, to be able to go shh.
Yeah. Unfortunately, now you'd think that my family would think, well, this is Dad writing the books. This is where the money comes from. So you think that they shh when I'm working, but no, I get the exact opposite. Every 5 minutes, I've got someone in here trying to disturb me with something about nothing. It's honestly, you need to talk to them for me.
I got you. So I don't know if you've seen very much of what we've done and stuff here. We always have a cat or a dog or a baby, or there's something going on in the background. So we understand to a very small degree from what you have to deal with. Oh my goodness.
And people don't appreciate it when you try to explain it unless they've been there. I remember when Del Toro got involved with Hater, I had a phone call. The other guy that bought the film rights was a man called Mark Johnson, who was the producer of Breaking Bad and Rain Man, really famous guy. And he was on the set of one of the Chronicles of Narnia films. I don't know if you remember those. He was in New Zealand, and he phoned me up and said, we're really interested in your book. We want to do something with it. And I'm thinking, God, I've got this incredible Hollywood producer on the phone. But the kids wouldn't shut up, and the dinner was burning, and I got the dog running around my feet. But because real life just doesn't sit still.
No.
I wish it would.
Not at all. So your writing style, it helps to paint a really nice picture. Like, you have plenty of detail in everything that you're doing, and you have it. It's also more of a simplistic style, so that people that don't read all the time, they can still keep up and keep in contact with everything going on with the storyline and how it unfolds. And it's a really nice experience for the readers. What is your inspiration behind Hater?
The inspiration, that's a good question. I'd finished writing a few of the autumn books, and I was kind of earning half a living from writing, and I just thought I just need to write as many books again, and I'll be able to do this full time. So I was thinking about a werewolf book. I was thinking about just how different how we have different types of people. I know it sounds really, really simplistic, but we have all these divisions that we use to carve ourselves up. So in my initial thoughts, it was a werewolf book, but I just looked at society and I thought, we split ourselves up because of our sex, because of our belief, because of our hair color, because of our lack of hair, because of our eye color, whatever divisions we can find, then we use those to kind of differentiate ourselves from other parts of society. And it's not right, but it's what human beings do.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was writing this book. I was planning it in 2005, which again seems like 5 minutes ago. So it's hard to believe it's like 14 years ago. But in the summer of 2005, I don't know if you remember, but there was a terror attack in London. And on the same day, we had, I think, 3 tube trains and a bus with suicide bombers all went into these different places and just set off their devices and caused absolute carnage. But what really struck me from that, and I'm certainly not trying to trivialize it at all, but what really struck me and what I took from that was the fact that one of the suicide bombers actually worked as a classroom assistant. So he wasn't a fully qualified teacher, but he spent his days in a junior school, so dealing with kids between the ages of 4 and 10. And he was teaching them, and he was trying to help them become, full adults and part of society and show them the right way. And I thought, how can you go from that one day to then going on a tube train the next day with a rucksack on your back filled with nails, just wanting to kill as many people as possible. And it's really that's what set me thinking. I thought about those two things together. So I thought about all the divisions that we've got, all the divisions that we've previously had, and I thought, what would happen if a completely new divide came, and you were either on one side or the other, irrespective of anything else. So it cut a swathe through families, it cuts businesses in half, it cuts everything in half, and suddenly you're a hater or you're unchanged. And I just thought that was a really stark starting point for the series, and just wanted to see how far that would go, how far it could take that. Not a very pleasant scenario, I know, but it's kind of like zombies in their purest form, I think, because zombies are just different versions of us. You know, they're just human beings without a pulse. And haters and unchanged, it's the same thing. They've either got the hate or they haven't. They just can't coexist. So that was really the starting point for the book, and it all went from there.
Nice. It completely shows too everything that you're discussing with me right now about all the different things going on in the world at the time that the Hater series came about. I mean, I can see bits and pieces of that in every bit of it, and especially where you're talking about, you thought about a werewolf type thing to begin with.
Yeah.
Once you get into it, if anybody hasn't read this series yet and they want to, I don't want to give too much of it away, but once you get into it, you have the super haters, and they kind of like wolf out more or less too. But you still got your werewolf kind of feel in there as well.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, those are the people who are so totally consumed by the hate that it's all that matters to them. And if killing that person means that they're going to die too, well, that doesn't matter, because the killing comes first for them. And it's a terrifying thought, but that's not too far away from what I was describing with the person going onto the tube train with a bomb strapped to their back. So it's quite frightening. Hater is really, for me, it's really weird, because every year it seems to be more relevant. I wrote it 13 years ago now, which again is really hard to believe because it feels like yesterday. But pretty much every year since then, I've had people telling me that this book is more relevant than it was a year ago. And now I think we've reached a point where you look at what's gone on just over this last weekend in New Zealand, and you think, how much lower can we sink as a species?
No, absolutely, and it's just one thing after another anymore, and I don't know if it's necessarily because there's more hate in the world going on at this point in time, or if it's just more publicized than it ever used to be.
I think that's certainly got a lot to do with it. Again, just going back to Hater, when I wrote it, it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility that the family in their little tiny setup in the UK, they hadn't got the internet, whereas now that's just unthinkable. You know, everybody's got that. And it was definitely with the attacks that we saw over the weekend, just the fact that the guy live streamed that as he was doing it is utterly terrifying, and I'm sure the ramifications for that are just going to be vast.
The depravity of them doing more things like that, I really feel like, unfortunately, it's become more of a generational thing with people in the live streaming. That's just what their generation does. So I don't necessarily know that they realize how much more ridiculous and how much more sinister it is to want to go around and film something like that.
Yeah. It's really interesting how we change generation by generation. I know that like I'm a grumpy old man now. I'm 50 in a year or so's time, and I'm saying things, and I can hear the things that my dad used to say to me and the things that I'm saying to my kids. And it is strange how our perceptions change as we get older. But I'm really struggling to fit in with the modern world at the moment in some ways. I look at some of the stuff I see online and some of the things I hear, and I just like to sink into my little man cave here and just make stuff up.
I mean, sometimes it's messed up as some of the thoughts going into the book processes and stuff are. I mean, it's a better world, really, than what we've got going on around here anymore. So I can see why anybody would want to just stay in and write a book. Like,
hey, if I'm getting too depressing here, then you've got to say, because nobody will want to listen to this grumpy old bloke from the Midlands in the UK just rambling on about how bad the world is today. But yeah,
I mean, it's 100% truth, and we're not people to be muted in any way. And
Hmm.
that's one thing that we like to bring to the talking scared aspect is we're trying to help people not only get themselves and their product out there, but really their viewpoints as a human being out there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting actually as a horror writer. I did a convention a couple of years ago in Dublin, and I remember making the point at the end of the panel that people should listen to us, because what we're talking about as horror writers is where we're going, is where we're going to end up. We kind of write about the worst case scenario, and I like to try and do it. You mentioned earlier about how my writing is quite simplistic in some ways, and that's intentional. And the characters are very ordinary a lot of the time, because I want people to read this and think, oh, this could happen. Okay, I'm stretching the point a bit with zombies and things like that, but I want people to read it and think, well, if I was in that situation, yeah, that's how I'd probably react. I want to bring some reality to it. So I'm definitely not some kind of literary genius at all, and I don't do nice flowery writing, because I just want the story, and I don't want that to get overwhelmed by anything else, because I think that's the point of a book, isn't it? To tell a story and to get people invested in it.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that it's always been very difficult for me to get into a series and keep going with it and
Hmm.
waiting for the time frames and stuff for it to come out. And I didn't have any issues whatsoever with Hater, because the way that it was described did make you relate to the characters. It did make you relate to the storyline behind it. And it was pretty easy to get into it and see, hey, zombies aside, the different splits in society, this is something that could be happening to us right now and has happened to us in the
Yeah,
past. And
yeah.
if we don't wake up at some point, it's going to happen in the future.
I think you're absolutely right. I did an interesting thing on my website over the last few weeks, and I just asked the question: if you had to pick a side, Hater or Unchanged, which one would you go for? And
I was
only
a
had,
hater.
pardon?
I was a hater. I took
You're a
this poll.
hater, yeah. Well, the weird thing is, I think about 59% of people, there's only about 400 people who actually did it, but about 59% went for Hater, and only what was left, 41% went for Unchanged. So it kind of says a bit about the state of the world, doesn't it? The fact that we automatically want to gravitate towards the aggressor. And
Yeah.
the weird thing is, when I was writing the original Hater books, I felt exactly the same way, that I wanted to be. If I was in that situation, then I'd want to be a hater. But I've just finished writing the second trilogy, which is not quite the same story, but certain parts of the same story told from the other perspective. And now I find myself sympathising more with the Unchanged. And I think the bottom line is, they're all exactly the same. Everybody will do what they have to do to survive. I've probably just given away.
Eventually, the Unchanged do really get into it, and actually have a couple of question points about that, as
Okay.
far as the fact that history and everything repeats itself as well on that one. You were talking about your characters and how you want them to be relatable.
Hmm.
Ellis was my absolute favorite. I mean, she done a complete 180
She
with
did.
her stereotype. She was a sweet little girl, kind of like on the heels of her parents, that sort of thing. And then once the hate took over, she was one of the vicious ones.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
thought it was very, very different to see the innocence with the children going into the full-fledged. She was borderline on
Hmm.
the extreme with the haters. And I really like that. What was your inspiration behind Ellis and having her personality switch from a 180 like that?
Well, it would be easy for me to say I've got 5 daughters and that was my inspiration, but that's not the case. They're all lovely and they don't kill, and not yet, not yet anyway.
No hater
Um,
children.
no, not so far. No. Um, so I think the thing is, the kids figure a lot in the first Hater trilogy, because I think what the Hater virus condition, whatever you want to call it, I think what that does to people is strip away all the trappings of society that kind of hold us back and make us most of the time not do these kind of things. But kids haven't got that, because young kids like Ellis in the book, they just haven't reached that level of maturity. So when something in their gut is saying kill, they go and kill. They think less about the ramifications of it. So it was really interesting to take somebody who I originally portrayed as being very sweet, young, innocent, and just make her into probably the most aggressive character in the whole series, I think.
I really believe she was.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, some of the things she was doing, I was kind of wincing when I was writing it. I'm thinking, I can't do this, but yeah, it really worked, and I think that went through to. There's some interesting bits in the third book in Them or Us when they talk about the future and what kids are and where we're going, and it's yeah, it's a startling thought because again, you know, what kind of example are we setting? It's bad enough in our world, in the real world, but just imagining the hater world where you can kill everybody without any implications. Well, what would the kids see and what would the kids do? It's scary stuff.
And the children are just so impressionable too, like not only in the book, but of course in real life. So
Yeah.
when you have a strain outbreak, as I've come to kind of believe that's how the hater thing is. It's like a
Hmm.
signal goes off in one's body, and it's just a strain that happens to either be there or not.
Yeah.
Um, and when that just kicks in, like they're kids, whatever is best for them at the time with whatever situation they're in, whether they're unchanged or haters, they're going to do it. And that's how they're
Yeah.
going to grow up from that point on. So it's not like something that the children are just doing because of their innocence too, but they're going to grow up and find that every bit of that is how they're going to start raising any offspring that they would have with the strain as well. So you're going to have even more and more aggressive as time progresses.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think um, if I could continue the hater story for another couple of generations, I would just be writing maybe about the werewolves that I was talking about originally, because they'd just be animals. There'd be nothing human of them left, I don't think.
No,
I must.
absolutely. And
I
that's
need
why I
to
said
write that.
super haters that
Yeah,
are coming up in the war in them or us. I mean, they're as werewolf as you can get without being werewolves.
I need to start taking notes here because I've got an idea for more books coming.
Oh, good. And I will be the first one to be grabbing another first edition because this series has just been so awesome to me. And when I saw that the new book was coming out for the,
Hmm.
I mean, it's kind of like a 2.5 in the Hater series, the new series that goes along with the Strain
Yeah.
is. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be a great year. Like,
Was that? Yeah. It feels like it did feel like a bit of a cash in that I decided after. I think it was about 5 years. I went back to the series to write another trilogy, but that came from my. I'm still working. The Hater film has been something that's been on and off and on and off for a long time. Guillermo
yeah.
del Toro, he almost made it. We had it about to go in front of the camera, but there were issues, as there usually is when people are making films, and so it didn't happen. The rights lapsed, and I've been working since 2015 with a guy from Newcastle in the UK. And at one point, we got really, really close to doing a TV series, and I hope we will go back down that route at some point, because I think with
I
Netflix and
would love
Amazon
to see.
Prime, yeah, it would just be phenomenal. But I thought the problem with a TV series for Hater is that the initial trilogy is just straightforward one person story, and that's okay. But in terms of a TV series, you need a lot more coming and going. You need a lot more substance to it. I think it would have worked as a film, but maybe not so much as TV. So I thought, well, the obvious thing to do is to write the other side of the story and just have the two things kind of dovetail together. And that's what I've tried to do with this second trilogy. It's a little bit convoluted. So that the first book, One of Us Will Be Dead by Morning, that takes place in a completely different location, but at the same time as Hater. And the new book that came out last month, All Roads End Here, that happens at the same time and in the same place as the second of the original books, Dogblood. And the last novel, which is called Chokehold, which will be out on my birthday, weirdly enough, in November.
Really?
That Yeah, good date choice by the publishers there. So that is, it's kind of a weird one. It's a sequel to Dogblood and All Roads End Here, but it's actually a prequel to Them or Us, so it fits in between the two, and it will tell you. I won't say too much about it, but it will explain how certain people get to certain places in Them or Us, and yeah, I think
Okay.
people are going to like it. I hope people are going to like it.
It sounds to me like I'm going to have to try and blaze through both of the series back to back to back until November so I can be caught back up on anything that I can't remember from when I read it to begin with.
Hey, I've had to do that because it had been, well, when I started writing these books, it had been, as I said, about 5 years since I wrote Them or Us, maybe longer than that. So the first thing I had to do was go back and read them again, because I thought if I'm writing about the same world, the same area, the same locations, I can't contradict myself. And hopefully I haven't. But I wouldn't want to do anything that kind of undoes what I'd done in the previous books.
Uh-huh. Now, with your DMRS, I'm going to go ahead and ask you about your cover art and stuff with it, too. So, Hater and Dogblood both were the white with just the blood. What was your inspiration behind changing your cover art to the dark with DMRS?
Well, I have to say it wasn't my inspiration. That was a decision that was taken by the publisher.
Okay.
But I was quite happy with it, because we had a lot of, I was going to say battles then, but they weren't battles. A lot of discussions over the cover art of Dogblood, which I can just see over your shoulder at the moment.
Yeah.
So,
that one too.
so I wanted to go the same way as Hater, because that had become such a recognisable cover. I just wanted to do something very straightforward again. And in the UK, I don't know if you've seen the UK covers.
I have. Most of them are with the facial effect, with the blood.
Yeah. So that was very, 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 very similar, all three of them. But the US publisher, Thomas Dunn Books, they just decided to go for something different. And I actually like the cover of Them or Us, because it is so different. And
I do too. It was the only thing that was a little different with me was where I'd always, every time one of the new books came out, I was looking for the white cover in the stores when you're looking through the spine. I was like, I got to get my head in a different place when I'm looking for this one.
Well, I'm amazed how kind of pedantic people get about books now, because the first book in this new series came out as a hardback, but the other ones are coming out as paperback, and people have been up in arms about that. Why can't I get them all in paperback? Why can't I get them all in hardback? And as you say, why aren't they all white? It's just different decisions taken by the publisher. I still release a lot of stuff independently, and I've got complete control over that. And I think I probably would have gone down the route of having things looking quite similar, but the publishers know best. You know that this is part of Macmillan, so they're yeah, exactly. So I'll just be guided by them.
Now that is the one book that I wasn't able to get in the hardback was my Autumn book. I did have to get the paper in it. Then the other ones I've only been able to find in paper. So of course I've got paper in those. But I really like the look of Autumn. And I didn't get to purchase Autumn until after Hater, because I didn't know it existed until after Hater. Mm-hmm. So read this one. Absolutely love the take on zombies in Autumn as well. Hater's still my favorite.
Yeah, I with Autumn, I tried to do something. I was saying earlier how I like to make my stuff quite believable and accessible. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved zombies. And I thought, well, how can I kind of make zombies more believable? And I love Romero's films, obviously, because they're just that's you can forget about all the old Voodoo and Hammer zombie films before, because for me, the zombie genre really started with Romero. And I guess you can trace it back a little bit to Richard Matheson's I Am Legend and things like that. But the real starting point for me,
I'm with you for Romero.
Yeah, Night of the Living Dead. So I grew up in the 80s in the UK, and at that time it was we weren't repressed, but we'd got. Have you heard of video nasties? Have you heard that expression? So basically, so the government in the UK in the early 80s decided that every horror film was just unimaginably bad for society, and they were all banned. So everything was ripped from the shelves, and it was impossible to get hold of anything. I'd got a friend whose dad ran a comic store in Birmingham, where I live, and he used to shoot over to America from time to time and come back with loads of stuff. And he came back with a Laserdisc player, so that's like huge CD. You remember Laserdisc, massive CD things, the size of old LP records. And he bought Night of the Living Dead, and I kind of heard of it in legend, but never actually watched it. And I sat and watched that with a group of friends. We watched it in the middle of the day, huge thunderstorm, and it was just completely changed me. And I thought, at some point, I want to write a zombie story. But the only thing that I had issues with, and I know this is what a lot of people like about zombie stories, but was the flesh eating. I didn't understand it, because they're dead. So why are they eating? They don't stop to go to the toilet. They don't stop for a cup of tea. They don't do anything like that. Why bother eating? So with Autumn, I thought I'll just change some of the ground rules a little bit. and those are that there is no flesh eating, and that by the end of page 1 of book 1, everybody's either a zombie or they're still alive, and you know where you stand. And as it happens, there's only about, I think, one survivor for every 100,000 zombies. So yeah, the odds are stacked against the survivors from page 1.
That was one of my favorite things about the Autumn series, is because your takes on zombies as a whole, especially with like the Hater strain and then the zombies that are in Autumn, is a zombie character that I can get behind. I don't like the traditional hovering around, no brains, eating brains. I don't like that kind of zombie. But your zombie in both different spectrums, and they are completely different. That's something I can get behind. And that's something I've been able to dive in and read. And I'm hoping that there's more people out there like me that like zombies, but a specific kind of zombie.
Well, that's really cool to hear, because that's what I was going for. I get frustrated with most zombie novels and zombie films. The zombies are exactly the same, and they don't change from page 1 to the very last page, or scene 1 to the very last scene. And I think they're as much a character as the survivors. So I wanted to give them kind of a story arc. And I'm not going to say too much, because I don't think you haven't read the whole series, you said, have you? You just read the first one?
No, I haven't read all of them yet.
Okay, well, there's a very definite story to the zombies, to the dead bodies, which, yeah, I think is really satisfying by the time you get to the end of it. And I'll shut up there, because I'm really going to ruin it if I talk anymore.
Don't give it away, then I'll be trying to
No.
read it all in one night so I can catch up with whatever you said. The hate strain that you had going on with the zombie film was a very intelligent hate strain. It was a very intelligent zombie. With the spin that you had on it, and that's one of the things that I really hadn't thought of before until I read the Hater series, that the antagonist from the first person perspective is the unchanged.
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed the way that was presented, because if you had the Hater strain in you, then you were completely in the right, and that was the perspective that it was written from, and that's something I hadn't really seen with a zombie book before.
One thing that I'll try and be careful how I say this, because I don't want people who haven't read the book yet to have it spoiled for them. But there's a twist, kind of 2/3 of the way into the book, and you know what I'm talking about here, and that really, it still takes a lot of people by surprise, and I think that is part of the reason for the success of the book, because there is this sudden shift, and everything you thought you knew, and then the direction you thought the story was going to go in, it doesn't. The cool thing about that is, Hater was quite a quick book to write. I think it took me maybe 3 or 4 months, and I struggled with it for quite a while, and I'd always get to this one particular point, and it just didn't work out. And then one day, literally sitting there without any planning in front of the screen, getting to the point that I'm talking about but not talking about here.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, what if? And then from that, everything else just flowed. And really, that for me, that was a pivotal moment. If I could rank important days in my writing career, then that's number 1, because that for me was what took Hater from being just a kind of run-of-the-mill zombie-esque story into being something completely different.
Absolutely. And I really, when was talking about different questions and stuff that may come up, I really kind of just went straight over dog blood, because if you really talk about dog blood, then it gives way too much information away.
Yeah.
So I kind of switched back straight from Hater all the way to the MRS to get to the war scene that's coming up. And with your werewolf-like Hater characters, your extreme haters, the people that can't control it, I mean, they're kind of like the animals from way back when. Kind of think 300-ish, how they're releasing their animals and things like that, and that's how they go and mow some of the people down to get level playing fields a little bit. And then just the use of concentration camps, I mean, that really hits with the whole history line of everything going on to try and even playing fields. I don't want to talk about what
it's
size
difficult.
what.
I know it's difficult. Yeah.
But I mean, that was just something you really hadn't thought of seeing in that light. So it gets you reading history and how history can repeat itself with mass hysteria with something such as the hater strain coming out. As far as every bit of that is concerned, was it meant to be a personification of the decay of human decency in the world when you wrote it that way?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier about worst case scenarios, and I think that's
Yeah.
what this is all about. It's about taking something and just driving it to its absolute extreme. And I think at that stage in the story, then the concentration camps is the extreme, because again, trying to be careful about how I answer this,
Yeah.
but it's, you know, what one side decides. Well, but I guess both sides are coming to the same conclusion: we can't exist without eradicating the other side. So the haters do it in one way, and maybe the unchanged do it in a different way. But it's not. I think it you read that, and I was really concerned. I didn't want it to seem like exploitative or sensationalized. I wanted people to read it and think, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, that's what would
Yeah.
happen. And maybe if they kind of, if they're people who felt some kind of affiliation with the Unchanged, they think, yeah, well, let's do that. That's what we need to do. And I think if you that continues, and that's the same kind of logic which takes you to the end of Dog Blood, which we won't talk about. And there's an event right at the end of
You
that.
can't really talk about Dog Blood without giving away the whole storyline behind the trilogy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very similar. I mentioned that All Roads End Here also takes place at the same kind of time as well. So it's interesting to look at what happens in Dog Blood, but look at that from the other side as well. And I think what it boils down to is that everybody thinks they're right, and nobody thinks they're wrong. And I think if you look at history, and if you apply that kind of logic, and you look at some of the dictators that we've had, and some of the absolute appalling human beings that have existed, I believe that they probably thought they were doing things for the right reason. You know, it's a frightening thought. I think that as animals, that we're kind of programmed to try and survive, and we'll do that. If it means we've got to hurt somebody else, if it boils down to you're going to die or I'm going to die, then we're all going to fight for ourselves, I think. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm absolutely not trying to excuse it at all here. I think it's just human nature at its worst. We're not particularly good.
Nature at its worst, but at the same time, in the way that your brain is able to come up with the cognitive connections between that, I mean, if you could apply that in a different situation, then it would really be human nature at its best coming out.
Yeah.
You don't ever see that side of things until
No.
you get in one of those positions.
And you're absolutely right, and I completely agree with you. And I often feel guilty because I am always going on about terrible things happening. But I think I totally agree with you that if we can just put all that to one side, and it sounds really corny, and all work together and not want to kill each other, you know, it would work. You know, we can do it. We're capable as a species of doing the most amazing things. I mean, look at where we are, and look, I'm sitting in my office in Birmingham, and I'm talking to you via my phone, and you're thousands of miles away, and we're having a conversation. It's just incredible, the stuff that people can do when they work in the right way. But as we said at the start of this conversation as well, you know, this same technology over the weekend has been twisted and used for an absolutely appalling end. It's the human condition. I think it's a blessing and a curse.
It is, because it seems like society as a whole is always looking for some way to push it in a way that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the means are. It doesn't matter, you know, what the outcome is or what it means for society as a whole and where we're going as a community. It seems like it is human nature to push things in a negative direction.
I think it is. I did an event maybe 5-6 years ago now. Quite a few well-known authors on the panel. A guy called Hugh Howey. I don't know if you know him. He wrote the book called War. Yeah. So Hugh was there, and he started off. It was a panel about why we love apocalyptic fiction, and he started off with a quote that he got out of a book, and the quote was basically, I'm completely paraphrasing now. I wish I'd still got it, but I just remember the gist of it, and that was, the human race has reached a terrible point. We're at the end. It's only a matter of time before we destroy ourselves. We're always fighting with each other. It's only going to get worse. And you'd think that had just come off Fox News or CNN or something, but it was actually something from, I think, some Greek philosopher from 3,000 years ago. I think we've always been like this. But also, as you mentioned earlier, we communicate now. You know, we can talk to anybody at any time, pretty much, and that means all these messages they transmit faster, and there are more of them, and they just get louder and louder in volume, I think.
Absolutely, and especially with the inventions of cell phones and stuff, and all the different capabilities that they have now. If there's something bad going around, if there's something good going around, if you eat something that you think was crap or something you like, you reach your phone out, you take a picture, and you send it out to thousands of people across the world. That's just
Yeah.
what we do now. So it's become a social norm to, no matter what's going on, you'll see somebody getting beat up and you'll have 6 or 7 different videos of it out there within 5 minutes, but not one person is putting the phone down to go and help them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. One of my girls, she went to a school that was really, it was a grammar school. I don't know if you have grammar schools in America, but that kind of, it's not just the normal school. You have to pass an exam to get in there. So there are a lot of intelligent kids there. And I just remember that when I was at school, so 30 odd years ago, if there was a fight in the playground, then it was just a big unruly scrap, and everybody just dived in, and then there were 2 kids having a go at each other in the middle, and this big group of kids all around just watching. But Becca's school, it just showed how far things have come, or how far things have gone downhill. But she showed me that fight because she'd got a DVD of it, and it had been filmed from different cameras and edited properly. And I just thought, whoa, where are we going? It's weird.
Exactly. It comes back to what you were saying about technology. I mean, again, that's another incident, a very, very tame incident compared to everything that happened over the weekend. But it starts somewhere, and
it does, yeah.
That's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and for my kids, that was just accepted. Oh yeah, we can watch our school playground fights again and again. It's just, yeah, where do we go? We're getting very depressing tonight. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I mean, it's absolutely full truth, especially with everything that's going on in the world today and everything. Like, there are so many different incidences anymore that I honestly don't watch the news very often. If it doesn't come across my social media stream, it's not something that I watch a lot of, because it's just continuously negative energy coming out from everyone. I don't understand a lot that's going on with society anymore, but it's not a good feel. And
No.
I've tried to limit myself with some of it, to be honest with you, because of that feeling.
No, I think you're right. I look back to my childhood, sitting at home with we had 3 channels on the TV. We had a house phone. We didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have the internet. I didn't have a TV in my room. And I look back now and I think that was kind of nice. I wouldn't mind a few days like that.
Oh, absolutely. That's anytime I'm overwhelmed or stressed out or anything, the first thing I can think of is my go-to when I was younger. I'd get on my ATV and go be outside. And now you don't really have as many opportunities to do that as an adult, of course. But the children that are coming up now, that's not how they handle things anymore. They get on a computer or any kind of technological thing to try and get stuff off of their heads. That's what they do. They don't go and experience things.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, it's a shame. There's a lot to be said for it. I think one of the reasons that I like writing post-apocalyptic fiction is just because all of that, all the stuff we're talking about is gone. I remember there was a scene in a TV series, I don't know if you had it over there, called Survivors. It was a BBC TV series. And basically it was do you remember it? It was about an epidemic, and pretty much everybody dies from this really virulent strain of the flu. And the story is just about the handful of people that are left. And I remember just watching a scene of that and seeing just 2 blokes walking across a field and walking to a river and just having a chat. And it wasn't a major scene, but I just thought, how nice is that? How cool that they haven't got to go to work tomorrow, and they haven't got to go to the shops, and they haven't got to deal with anything on their phones. They're just in a field, just talking. I think I'd love that kind of simplicity.
Me too. The area that I live in now is nowhere by any stretch of the imagination a city, but it's still a little more than what I was used to growing up, and I miss the rural area kind of living. I miss that the kids won't have that opportunity, because if you live somewhere like that, there isn't any other opportunities for you anymore.
That's right. Yeah, it's a difficult
So
choice, isn't
if
it?
you don't get on with the technology of it all and the businesses and the cities, then you don't have anything anymore. So you can't just experience that type of living anymore.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, yeah. I don't know what to say about that, because you're right, and we're getting very, very sad and melancholy now.
Well, we can switch back for a minute then. So
Yeah, go on
you
then.
were talking about your One of Us Will Be Dead by Morning
Yeah,
book, going on with another part of the series with Hater,
yeah.
and it kind of goes coincide with it because it's during the same time frame, but they don't cross over. Was that a difficult thing to do, to not have it crossing over as you were writing it into each
Well,
storyline?
I thought with the first book of the second series, I thought that if I did make it crossover, it would feel a bit convoluted. So I wanted to tell a completely separate story, because,
Yeah,
again, going back to the discussions we'd had about possibly making a TV series, I wanted to introduce some characters who were completely separate, and that's where you get Matthew Dunn, the guy who's the lead for this second trilogy. Yeah, I just wanted them. I thought it was a really cool idea to take a group of people out of the norm, to shove them somewhere completely remote where they hadn't got any communication, when they hadn't got any way of finding out what was going on, and to see how they dealt with the hater virus outbreak, whatever we want to call it, because we'd seen how it affected people in the middle of a city, and I just wondered how it would affect people at the other end of the scale. Just this handful, is it 14 people, I think, trapped on this little remote island in the North Sea. I just thought it would be a really interesting switch in perspective. And then, of course, Matthew. Well, sorry, I've just given away a spoiler there. Excuse me. Whoever survives the first book will then get back into the second book and the third book, and be right in the middle of the mayhem that we've already seen in Dog Blood and Them Or Us.
absolutely. And one of one of the things about your autumn series, it was very fast paced. One of the things about your Hater series, it drawed you into the storyline, and then it hit hard. Now with this second part, your One of Us Will Be Dead by Morning, it hits hard from the get go. People are dying left and right, and there's not even that many people on the island. So if there is any issues with readers out there that can't get into something unless it hits you hard at the beginning, this is definitely the series for you.
Yeah, I did think that actually when I wrote One of Us Will Be Dead by Morning, because, yeah, as you say, in the prologue, in the very first chapter, you've got a ferry full of kids going to visit this island, and let's just say it's not a great spoiler to say they don't make it. And yeah, I've seen reviews when they talk about the body count by the end of page 2, and it's
Yeah.
cool. I thought it's going to be a very small group of people, so it's going to have to hit the ground running and just keep going, which I hope it does.
Just in your prologue, there's one area right in the main beginning of it, and it's just talking about how you can see out the door as you're running through, like just the bodies falling all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
It paints a really good picture too. If you're like me, and as you're reading, you can see it playing out in your head. I mean, you can just see them. It's like when they're tearing into it, and it's just flinging off to the side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I did a book reading just when I'd started writing that book, and I thought, I've got to give these people something new that they haven't heard before. So I said, right, I'm going to test something on you, and it'll be the first chapter of the new Hater book. So One of Us Will Be Dead by Morning, and I just read it out, and there was absolute silence. And I looked around at some of the faces, and people looked traumatized, and I thought, yeah, that's staying in. That's good.
And then it's true. That's the main feel that you get going into it. And as soon as you read that prologue, you're like, okay, we know what this is going to be now. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
you're
But
getting excited, and you're making plans and making time to sit down and get into it, because you know how it's going to start, and then it completely changes on you.
well, that's it. But the thing about it is, you know how it's going to start, but because it's written in third person, unlike the first Hater books, you know how it's going to start and how it's going to go, but all of the characters don't. So you've got an advantage, and I think that gives you a kind of unease, because you know the shit's going to hit the fan for them, but they
And
don't.
you're just waiting around the corner to see when it's going to happen.
Absolutely, it's cruel, really, isn't it?
It's cruel for the characters. It's great for the readers.
Yeah, that's what I keep telling myself. Well,
So, of course, Hater wasn't the only series that you had that was getting a lot of recognition, and
Hmm.
Autumn did come first. And in 2001, it ended up being made into the film adaptation that you were talking about,
Yeah.
and it got released in 2009. Now, how was that experience taking the book into the film adaptation, and what did you think about what they done with it? Because I know we talked about it just for a minute earlier. I'm sure we'll get
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. It's difficult because I think you have to take, as a writer, if you sell the film rights to one of your books, you've got to take a kind of leap of faith and say to people, go on, get on with it and do what you can with it. And I think the people who made Autumn, the intentions were absolutely spot on. They understood the book. They knew what they wanted to do, but unfortunately they just didn't pull it off. I think a lot of that was because they'd got a really limited budget. And as I mentioned earlier, in Autumn, you've got one survivor. You've got 100,000 zombies or something like that for every survivor, and we'd got like a trailer full of extras. So it was never going to properly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
it
couldn't
was.
see the magnitude of it.
You can what? Sorry.
You couldn't see the magnitude of what was really going on
No.
with the zombies through the
Yeah.
budget that you had.
I mean, at the end of the first Autumn novel, when the three characters are trapped at a farmhouse, they build a wall to stop the zombies from getting into the farmhouse, and they use absolutely anything. So they're using tractors and diggers to move stuff over, and they're piling things up. And because they're so badly outnumbered by the zombies, and because the zombies are reacting to noise, and they're the only things left making any noise, now suddenly there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of zombies swarming around this one tiny farmhouse. And in the Autumn film, we had about 15 people around a little picket fence, and it could never have had the impact that we wanted it to. And it was a
Yeah.
real shame because, as I said, it was made with real good intentions, and the cast were good. I think. Have you seen it? Have you watched it?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah,
I thought the cast was pretty spot on with it, honestly.
yeah, it's really good. I think if you know the book, then you'll enjoy it a lot more than if you were just watching it cold. If you hadn't come across Autumn before, I think, yeah, we talk about a hated TV series, but given the success of The Walking Dead, I would absolutely love an Autumn TV series because I think the five novels and all the extra material that I've written, I think would really, we could produce something special with that.
See, going back to the possibility of a Hater TV series, I think you had enough information going into the actual beginning of the Hater series instead of the One of Us Will Be Dead by Morning series, because
Hmm.
you do have subtext that's coming in and out of different families along the way as what
It's
they're
true.
going on. And
Yeah,
if you were just able to embellish on their lives a little bit more to make it a storyline for them as you're going through the main story, I think you'd have plenty of content.
I think if we did make a TV series of all six books, I think we'd probably ignore One of Us Will Be Dead by Morning because
Yeah.
it was really necessary to set up the second trilogy. But as you say, in terms of the actual story, you've got enough there already. So all we
Absolutely. It flows.
Yeah. So I think that would work well on its own. In fact, I think now we're looking more at a film adaptation of the first book again. And I think that
Right.
when I spoke to the producer a while ago, we were talking about the possibility of film adaptation of the first book and then followed up by a TV series. And I think that would work. And
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
when you've had a chance to read All Roads End here and Chokehold, I think you'll see that the other four books, so Dogblood, All Roads, Chokehold, and Them or Us, they would work together as one big story. So you've got the two different sides, and you see in the new books, you'll see how certain characters got to certain places. But as I said earlier, the first three books were just Danny McCoy's story, so I didn't want to deviate from that. So all these
Yeah.
things that were happening in the background were just in the background and didn't get talked about in any great detail. I just
I
want,
like that. It's separate but equal. They're
yeah,
they're the same idea, but it's completely different way that it's portrayed.
yeah, absolutely. And again, that boils down to the fact that that's what the theme of the books is. It's just two sides, and I thought I couldn't write one side and not the other.
Oh, absolutely. Now, not everybody has the patience to wait for different books to come out in series and try to
Hmm.
keep up with the storyline, go back, reread the first one because you're so excited for the second one to come out. And luckily for them, and I didn't know this until here recently, they don't have to be for your writing. And I haven't gotten to pick up any of the standalone novels yet, but I absolutely plan to because I absolutely love all the different books that I've read by you so far already.
That's cool.
So how different is it for you writing a standalone novel versus these trilogies that are going through the processes when you have to get a beginning, middle, and end all in one book?
I find it so much easier. It's really straightforward. I think writing a series, it just needs so much planning. Excuse me. I've got another series that I'm hoping to write called The Spaces Between. I haven't even started it yet, and I've been planning this since 2010. But I don't want to start writing it until I've got everything in place. I'm a bit of a pedantic planner. I like to get the plot sorted out before I start writing. It always changes. No, it always changes once I do start writing. But you know that it's but that's good. It's an organic process. It's cool. But I like standalones because there's no pressure. There's no weight of expectation. You haven't got to set anything up for the next book, and you haven't got to resolve anything from the last book. You can just tell a story. So I've published quite not a huge number. I think 3 or 4 standalone novels, and I love doing them, and it's something I want to do more of. In fact, I've just started another one. It just gives you a chance to do something completely different. So I've written the same novel twice, a couple of times, because I mentioned right at the beginning that I started writing in 1996, and the first book that I had published was called Straight to You, and it was shocking. I thought it was great at the time, but looking back, I looked back at it after about 10 years, 15 years, and thought, this is really bad. Because in the meantime, I'd learned how to write. And when I wrote the book, I was just a kid, really. I was living with my mum and dad, and I hadn't got any responsibilities. And the story's about a man and his wife, or his girlfriend in the original version, and the relationship between them. And I just wasn't mature enough to write it. So 15, 20 years later, I looked at it again and thought, I like the story, but I just don't like the writing. I don't like the characters. So I rewrote that book, and I think it's much better for it. And that's a book I'm very proud of. It's kind of an apocalyptic romance. So the son's dying. There's a guy in Cambridge in the UK, and his wife has gone to visit her dad in North Wales. So that's kind of diagonally across the country. And we've got maybe 3 or 4 days left before the sun explodes and everything's gone. And he's just got to get to her. But you can imagine that with everybody knows that the end's coming, so society's falling apart and people are getting more aggressive and infrastructure's collapsing, etc., etc. It's a good old tearjerker.
You know, with the end coming, you can't just live your life for the next 3 days. That's not in us.
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely.
not. It's human nature. We have to screw up and pretty much anything we can, as long as.
Because I bet if we were in that situation now, we'd all just sit there for longer than we need to, thinking, "Oh, it can't be happening. No, it's going to be all right tomorrow. It'll be absolutely fine." But it might not be, and that's what Straight to You is about. The guy has to make some very tough decisions, and they get tougher as his journey progresses and as time runs out. It's I'm really proud of that one. It's about to be released in audiobook in the next couple of weeks. It'll be available in audiobooks. If anybody wants to pick it up, please do.
Nice, and we will provide a link on the bottom of this feed for you guys. So if you're interested in getting any of David's books or his audio books, you'll be able to get that first link right there.
That'd be cool. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And like I said, you already know I am a little behind on the whole Autumn series right now, and trying very hard to catch up with the 2 little ones. It's completely different than trying to go through the Hater series like I did when I was younger. Is there any changes that of note between the Americanized publication or the UK publication?
There's not really. The stories are exactly the same. It's just for the UK market, they get tweaked. Well, actually, no. It's because I write in UK because I live in the UK, so I'm writing with Britishism. So they get tweaked for the American versions. So at the moment, excuse me, I'm just doing the edits on Chokehold, which is coming out in November. So I'm going through the manuscript and having to change take all the U's out of colour, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, because I was going to say because we write it right, and no, but I won't. No, we just have different ways. We have different ways of doing things, don't we? So really, essentially, that's all. It's just cosmetic differences in the books, but the story is exactly the same.
Oh, cool. Because I didn't know how exactly the different editions worked, so that's really cool to know that it is the same. It's just you have to change it
Yeah.
for the right document.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of things like that you don't think about, like the boot of a car becomes the hood of the car, and the pavement becomes the sidewalk. Fortunately, editors take care of that for me, and I just have to accept all the changes in the Word document.
Nice. You have way too many accomplishments to name off every one of them in the horror community as an author. And it really shows with all the different progressions and stuff in the books how wonderful all the subtext is in
Thank you.
everything that's coming. What was your first aha moment, so to speak, when you were first starting out with this and everything started getting recognizable?
Well, I think there have been a few. The very first one was the book that I've just been ripping apart straight to you. The book that I said I couldn't stand initially. When I wrote the first version of that, I did a couple of drafts. I've been trying to write a book for a few years before and never really got there. So I set myself some rules, like I will write at least one page a day, and I won't go back and start editing until it's finished, etc., etc. So I made myself do it. But the key moment for me with that was when I was really nervous, and I gave it to a close friend, and the first person I'd ever given to read this book, and I said, just go and have a look at that and see what you think. And she took it away, and I was expecting to wait weeks, and then she'd come back and say, yeah, it was okay, but she read it the next day, and she came back and said, I can't believe you wrote that. That was amazing. I was crying at the end, and I thought, wow, that I can do it. It's just that little bit of feedback right at the beginning. And I think in some ways that's been more valuable to me than having Guillermo del Toro getting involved and having contracts with big publishers in America. I think if I hadn't had that first bit of feedback, none of this would have happened.
Nice.
There you go.
And it's it is nice when you're first starting off on something that you just like, I'm going to try it and see if it sticks,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And then you get that recognition, and it's like, okay, cool. So I am the shit. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's still the biggest,
as
but
a self-published writer, you've made so many waves in this genre as far as horror goes, and especially with the post-apocalyptic theme that you've got going on with a great deal of the writings that I've read so far, anyways. And I mean, it's just amazing to see how it comes up, and I feel so honored that you were able to take some time out and talk to me about these books. Anybody that is wanting to follow in your shoes, so to speak, and is trying to get into the genre and get into the writing and everything, would you have any advice for them on such a thing?
well, first of all, can I just say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate it. And for me, there's nothing better than talking to people who really like the books that I've written. So thank you first and foremost. What I'd say to people who want to get into this industry, I think it's harder than it was because it's easier to write books and publish books than it was. But for me, if you've got the stories and you've got the voice, then you'll do it. So just don't give up on it. That sounds really corny, but it's true. I mentioned just a minute ago that I had loads of false starts trying to write a book, and I just never got anywhere until I made myself sit down and almost think of it as a work project. You will do this many pages a day. You will not do this until you've done this. You'll not complete X until you've done Y, that kind of thing. And really just believe in it and just do it and just get it out there. And another thing is that when you're writing, the first draft is going to be crap. Doesn't matter how many books you've written, the first draft is going to be awful. It's all part of the writing process. So don't get disheartened and look at what you've written and think, I can't. That nobody's going to want that, because to write a book, you've got to go through it so many times. You've got to keep polishing it until you can't find anything that you think you can improve in it. So you're going to have draft after draft after draft which aren't there, but just keep at it. So I think anybody who's got the desire to tell a story can tell that story. Just don't expect it to happen overnight. It does take a hell of a long time.
And if they really have the means and the desire to do something, they will know it's not going to be an overnight thing, because it is a struggle when you decide that there's anything you want to do, whether it's reading or acting or writing. You know it's going to be a process. There's no way that it's just going to be a overnight sensation type thing.
Oh,
There's steps you have to go through. There's different people you have to go through. So I very much appreciate you just being straight candid and saying, just keep going on with it, keep it up.
and some people do get overnight success, but I think they're the exception. You hear about them obviously because they're
Yeah.
successful, but you know, and it's not continual. It comes in peaks and waves. And when Hater kicked off with Guillermo del Toro, everything went through the roof for me. But now things are very different and very much quieter. You just have to take the rough with the smooth, I guess, to use a cliche. But the key thing is, and you kind of touched on it there, if this is what you want to do, you'll keep doing it. And I still go to sleep at night with stories in my head, and I still wake up thinking about those same stories, and I can't not write. And I think that to me is proof that I've got to keep doing this. And I think that if there's anybody who's listening who wants to write and who feels that same kind of desire, then you've got to listen to it. And I think it's better to write a book and not have anybody read it than to always be thinking, well, what if I'd written that book? You've just got to go for it.
You don't know if you don't try.
Exactly right.
And
Exactly right.
that was, I guess that was really very well driven into my head with this experience with Talking Scared and with Haunted Honeymooners as well, because when your new book come out, like I just, where did I got it at? The All Roads End Here.
Yeah,
And
you
just,
got it.
yeah. I had to. I told you, so I've got all of the ones that I knew about. There was just so many more I didn't know about, and now I have that opportunity as well. Um, I mean, just being able to contact you and telling you how much I love your reading and stuff. I mean, I didn't expect you to say, yeah, you'd be a part of Talking Scared with us. So it kind of really hits home for me. It's just, you don't know if you don't try. You don't know if you don't talk to people. And I greatly appreciate you spending this time here with us and just talking to us about these amazing works of art you have here.
No, it's been great. I've really appreciated it. Thank you. And from my point of view, I could talk about my books all day to people, but the opportunity never comes up, or it doesn't come up as often as it should. And so when you contacted me, and when anybody contacts me, it's always yes first, and then we'll sort it out later. And so yeah, I thank you for reading the books. That's the most important thing. Because if you weren't reading the books, and if other people weren't reading the books, that I wouldn't be able to write them. Well, I would still write them, but you know what I mean. It just
Yeah,
wouldn't be as easy to invest the time in them.
I get that. And I mean, it's just so cool that you see that as an author, that any opportunity to come up to talk about these books, especially with people like me that's like giddy about the different books that are coming out. I mean, I very much appreciate you having the foresight to be able to say, yeah, I want to talk about my book today, you know?
That's really
Um,
cool. And
I can keep here all night, man, and I just love being able to talk to you and pick your brain a little bit. But I don't want to keep you here forever because, like I said, we got started UK 10 p.m. and I want you to get some sleep tonight.
yeah, I know I've got a busy day tomorrow.
Yeah.
Way
So I
past my
don't want to
bedtime.
keep you too much longer. We always like to give every one of our guests the opportunity to just have the floor and anything that they want to say about themselves, about the experience, about any promotions they have coming up. We like to give that opportunity. That's because that's what we're standing for. That's what we are. So the floor is absolutely yours.
Okay, well, I'll probably keep this really, really short and simple because I feel like I've rambled for the last hour or however long we've been talking. But yeah, I just ask anybody who is interested in what they've heard just to check out my website, davidmoody.net, and you'll find links to everything from there. There's details about all the different books, the films, recommendations of the films and books that I've liked, just general news things, and really everything hangs off that. So if you've been at all interested, please have a look. And yeah, I hope people read my books and enjoy them. I always use the word enjoy, then think that's not the word to use with my books because they're not. I hope they are enjoyable, but they're not always. It's not always a pleasant read, is it?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you want to be able to enjoy reading the book, but you don't necessarily want to be like, great, everybody's dying.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, I think of them like when you have a really bad nightmare and you wake up and you think, oh shit, and then you think, oh, just a dream. I would love for people to have that kind of reaction to my books and read them and think, oh my god, everything's gone to hell, and then think, oh, it's just a book. It's okay.
It's just,
Yeah.
It's not quite as bad as it's read out. Just depends on how political you want to get. But
Yeah, exactly. The problem is, you finish reading a book now and you put on the news and you think, oh, that's even worse. But yeah.
But I very much appreciate this opportunity with you. It has been absolutely phenomenal to be able to sit down and talk to you. And that's going to be it for us for Talking Scared. My name's Trish. James has been interacting with everybody today. He will be back to doing this because this isn't me. I'm not the face. James is the face. I just had to be able to take the time to sit down and get to talk to you, David.
This is not the face, believe me. Great face for radio, I think.
But thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. And that'll be it for us, guys. So we'll see you next time. We do have Talking Scared coming up next Monday with Kayla from Fallsburg Fearplex, like we was talking about earlier on. And that's going to wrap it up tonight. Thank you, David.
Thank you.